Hello and welcome to Code with JV, AI Snapshot number 7. It's been a couple of weeks since I did the last one of these, and I've got enough content for 2 episodes. I'm just taking half of that, putting a text summary up in the email and Discord. Links below if you want to get access to it, because hey, AI news waits for no one. Just a regular sized episode this week. Let's jump into it. First up, TextFX with Google, which is a collaboration between Lupe Fiasco and a team of Google engineers using the Palm models. I love lots of things about this project. I'll show you my favorite part of the video.
So initially, we thought that maybe Lupe would want an AI system to write lyrics for him, verses and raps, but it turns out that he didn't want that at all. What he wanted was a tool that helped him explore the universe of possibilities that can arise from any given word or phrase or concept.
So, like a lot of engineers out there, people just went straight to how do we do the work of the artist for them with these tools? It reminds me of a letter that I read early on in ChatGPT time. Hey, write a song like Nick Cave. And they sent him to him, and he had this scathing response about, yeah, lots of people do that, and they're garbage. It's a great letter. I encourage you to read it. What the team did was they partnered with Lupe to say, hey, how would you use these tools to actually add value to your work? They've developed 10 little tools all around things that Lupe wanted to write different raps. You can jump in and play with the tools, but I encourage you to check out that video because to me it just highlights the way AI should be rolled out, but also why I'm not so concerned about AI job losses. Ultimately, I think a human and an AI is always going to be more performant than an AI alone for so much of the valuable tasks out there in the world. It's not about, hey, write a rap for Lupe. It's more about how do you give Lupe the tools so he can write more raps, better raps, etc. Meta AI are out with a new tool, Audiocraft. This is a combination of a bunch of their audio tools together, complete with open source code and models. You can do things like text to music, text to audio. So here is whistling with the wind blowing. Hey, whistling in the wind. Etc. You can make it music, you can do lots of different things. I've also seen versions of this which is image to sound, where you put up an image and say, what's the sound that's associated with this? So text to sound or image to sound. So it's a rich set of tools. Audiocraft on GitHub, hey, give it a play. Here's an example of someone not using Audiocraft to my knowledge. Have you seen the image to video tools where they make the image slightly animated? Someone's gone and done this with a bunch of lovely Monet images. The tools are starting to allow people to combine images and video and sound and text. And I think we're going to see some really interesting art come out of all of this. Again, it'll be people making the art, not the AIs. Here's a fun article. This is written by David Brin, who's an award-winning sci-fi author. He's essentially trying to answer the question of like, if AIs get really good, like way better than humans, how on earth are we going to keep them aligned with human interests? So the alignment problem, particularly with regards to like super AI or hyperintelligence. His idea is like give them a fixed identity coupled to hardware, which he's talking about with the soul, and then essentially incentivize them to police each other. So if an AI starts acting out of alignment with the perceived interests of humanity, the other AIs will give it disincentives. So he's got a whole article about it. Speculative stuff, but it's also fascinating stuff written by a forward-thinking sci-fi author. OpenAI have now got GPTBot, which means that the web scraper who gets all the information that OpenAI train their models on is going to be polite and listen to your robots.txt file. So you can formally say, hey, GPT, don't read these pages or read these pages, etc. I think we're going to see things like we saw with search engine optimization around large language model optimization, where people are presenting information in a way which is either easy for the AI bots to find or hard for them to find. This ties into also things like people publishing images and making them very hard for AIs to train off those images, which I've seen some of. Oh, here's a fun project. People who have trained an AI model to listen to keyboard strokes in a room and to figure out which key was pressed, aka an acoustic keylogger. It's not just about getting something on your physical computer. If someone can get a microphone in your room and run this stuff, they can log all your keys and pinch passwords, etc. So it's another attack vector. It's also just an idea of this core technology can be applied in so many different areas. Under the hood, it's fairly similar to a lot of the stuff that you've seen for the other tech that I'm showing you. GPT LLM Trainer. This lets you spit out a trained Llama 2 model quite quickly and easily. Often you don't have training data for what you're trying to do. This will use GPT-4 to create a bunch of synthetic training data. It can make 100 bits of it for you. It can make 1,000 bits of it for you. I've seen people use this for things like, hey, give me a Llama model, which is trained particularly to make excellent prompts. So instead of like looking up on the internet for what prompt will do this for me, you can teach a Llama model how to be a good prompt writer. You can ask it what you want to do and it can give you a fancy prompt which you can put into a bigger model, for example. But it's a very arbitrary use case. This is just a Jupyter notebook. You say, what do you want the tool to do? And it will go and generate all the synthetic data for you, fine tune the model and spit you out a fine-tuned Llama 2 model. I reckon we're going to see a lot more of this fine-tuning happening. It's going to become easier and more commonplace. I think most developers are going to be learning how to fine-tune these models, how to know what to do, whether using data you've got or synthetic data or a combination. I reckon this is a good thing to pay attention to. Maybe give it a kick. Do you remember the article that came out a while ago around like 25 agents in a town which start gossiping with each other and inviting to parties, etc., and having schedules? Well, the researchers open sourced their code to do this. You can now download the code, run it, and have a simulated environment with a number of agents which you can control. Andreessen Horowitz, their firm, has put out another open source project, the same thing, AI Town, all these personalities walking around. And interestingly, OpenAI have just bought Global Illumination, which is a game studio with a lot of like good tech talent in there. So it could just be an acqui-hire, but they were building Biomes, which is an open source Minecraft version. It makes me start to think about, okay, you've got these simulated worlds and a lot of stuff happening here and a lot of stuff happening in the NPCs in computer games, getting AI powers behind them, etc. And OpenAI make their first acquisition in 7 years and it's a simulated environment like this. Maybe there's going to be some really interesting research and that what's happening in the NPCs and gaming space and simulated agents having conversations with each other and real humans, maybe that's going to yield a really rich data set, which will get some powerful AIs coming out the back of it. But also, maybe it's just an acqui-hire, who knows. This is HeyGen. They are a tool you can sign up to. It is a limited scope text to video application. Instead of doing text to any video, it's basically text to an avatar talking head type video. You've got a bunch of avatars you can choose from, a little bit generic, but you can also upload yourself. You can upload voices and images and create your own custom avatars. This is the avatar of the CEO.
Hey guys, it is Josh. Welcome back to HeyGen TikTok channel.
I think that we've seen the beginnings of the TikTok influencers, the Instagram influencers who are pure AI personas. I don't know if it's good or not, but the tech is possible and who knows where it's going to go. Here's another fun tool. You may have seen some demos of like AI agents having a conversation with a sales rep or a customer rep, etc. PlayHT, they're one of the leading ones behind this, and they've been really leaning into low latency text to voice generation. So you can have on the fly text generated by a large language model, send it to a voice model, have it speak it, listen to the other person's spoken response, transcribe it with something like Whisper, send it to the language model. And the trick is basically getting that fast enough that it doesn't feel awkward. So there's not these long silences when you're waiting for the AI to talk back to you. They're one of the leaders in this space. You can start to condition it with the emotions it's got, and they're going to have APIs, etc. So this is out there. You can sign up for the beta and try and get access to it. The conversational aspect where you're really talking to the AI in real time and it feels good and natural, it's not here yet, but I think it'll be here soon. OpenLLM leaderboard. Hey, guess what? New people on top. There's some folks, Boston University, put together a model called Platypus. Good images. They haven't done too much novel in terms of the technologies they're using. What they've really done is leaned into what they call this Open Platypus dataset. So they've gone and refined the datasets, got them quite small, and they're quite cheap to train. So you can train the 13 billion parameter Platypus model on a single A100 in 5 hours. Small datasets, really quick, rapid fine-tuning. This is another data point which is making me think that, hey, fine-tuning is going to become mainstream. All their stuff, it's open source. You can see exactly what they're doing to the data sets. You can see where they're getting them. You can see how they're getting their performance, and they're all building on top of Llama 2. The impact of Meta making Llama 2 available for folks is really becoming seen. I've also heard a bunch of stories of people ditching API use of OpenAI or Claude, etc., in favor for a fine-tuned Llama model. I think it's going to be interesting how the proprietary models compete with these fine-tuned ones. On their website, they've got the chat bot here where you can play around with it. It's run by Open Orca Platypus, and they went to town and got themselves a little Orca Platypus, which is all that really matters, right? Okay, Stablity AI, they've come out with StableCode, which is a 3 billion parameter model fine-tuned for coding tasks. So really interested in this. There's a lot of activity in the code assistance model, and I think coding assistance is one of the domains which I'm seeing people start to acknowledge as, yeah, legit use for the technology in production at the moment, lots of people starting to use. So things like this is what's going to enable people to use coding assistance for proprietary code bases where your employers aren't comfortable for that data to go into Azure or OpenAI, etc. Huggingface have released a Swift version of their Transformers library, which means that Apple developers who are shipping stuff for iPhones and iPads, etc., well, they can now have an easy way of embedding a language model into it. Apple still haven't shown their hand. I've heard some predictions about sometime this year we expect to see what Apple's response to generative AI is going to be, maybe early next year. The thing in their corner is they've got all these super AI chips on all the devices and they've had them for ages. If you're a developer, you can't get access to these chips. It's only used for like core system things like the face recognition stuff. But you can imagine a world where Apple develop a better Siri and all the app developers start to embed and get access to those chips. I wouldn't be surprised if we see AI coming to Apple apps quite rapidly once this starts to unfold. All right, tail end. Microsoft announced AzureChatGPT, which is hilarious. It was essentially an open source project which they pitched as, hey, don't trust OpenAI with your data, trust Microsoft. So here's the open source version of ChatGPT. Here's how you plug it into an Azure backend, which accesses the OpenAI models, the Azure hosted versions of it, going for that sweet enterprise market of the people who don't want to send ChatGPT their stuff. Trust Azure instead. It was taken down pretty quickly. It's on the Wayback Machine now. If you want to see the original thing on it, there's a link in that article. You can still get access to the code. People have cloned it all over GitHub. It makes me start to think about like, hey, OpenAI have got some legal team who are pretty good at cease and desist. Microsoft are being quite aggressive in how they're trying to cut OpenAI out of stuff. I expect that relationship is somewhat strained, and this is just an example of it. Also, I think it's an example of how many companies are going to be chasing that enterprise AI market, whether it's getting the coding assistance that's really under their control, whether it's about giving them general ChatGPT type interfaces or copilots, etc. It feels like that's quite unsolved and there's no clear dominant player at the moment, and there's a bunch of people who are trying to get in there. Final one of my favorite things I've seen in a while. Let's Recast. It takes text from an article that you want to read and it summarizes it and gets 2 AI voices to speak it in a conversational style podcast. So it's faster, turns these 7-minute reads into 2-minute reads, etc. It's also shareable. You can do that for an article you want, and then they make it so you can share that with someone else, which is fascinating. If you think about this company who's like reading The Atlantic and Bloomberg, etc., taking their content, summarizing it, turning it into another format and cutting them out completely, and their ads aren't getting shown. Is that fair use for those folks? I expect you'll see a bunch of the existing publishers get really grumpy at this kind of tool. But also, if you ran this locally, because you can learn how to write code to do stuff just like this. Is that fair use where you go to an article and you're like, I don't want to read that. I'm going to save it and get it summarized by a language model, maybe translated to another language, maybe turned into an audio, maybe turned into a video. That's possible right now. You can stitch together that kind of app yourself if you wanted, and there are people coming out with tools that let you do it. I think it opens up that fascinating questions of what is fair use of content, but also I think it highlights a world where people browse the web a lot less. If you look at their selling points, it's like save time because it doesn't take you as long, get through more stuff. Lower screen time, do it while you're walking, exercising, etc., which feels like probably a good thing. I think it would be a net good if we had less screen time in the world. And this is a really good way of doing it. It's a useful tool. And the conversational thing was really interesting because it's not as boring. It's more interesting hearing different voices bounce off each other. I think it's just a hint of things to come. Hey, that's the snapshot for this week. So there's a lot more stuff I could have spoken about, but hopefully that gives you a sense about what's going on. Codewithjv.com/snapshot if you want to get it in your inbox and some longer form analysis. Have fun out there. See you next time.